Hi, everybody. We are in Eruvin, Daf Yud Aleph 11. We have some really important topics tonight that are extremely relevant to almost every Eruv that's built today. So the first topic is, can we allow a bigger opening in a mavoi than usual if we have a fancy border or a door frame? And then the main topic is going to be door frames. Can you use the door frames, what we call surat hapetach, right? Which means two poles and a lintel on top. Is that considered like it's a full wall or not quite? Does it not really do? Does it not really fill in what's in between? Almost every eruv today uses this idea of surat hapetach, door frames. So can you use that for a majority of the circumference of the eruv? We're going to see Rav says no. Rabbi Yochanan, we try to prove, he says no, we don't end up proving it, but we'll see. This halakha, every eruv in the world, except for ours in Brooklyn, depends on this halakha, and so I'll explain why. And then we're going to be talking a little bit more about the requirements of a door frame. Does it need to have a hinge? Do the sides need to reach the top or not? So all about door frames, very practical. Also a couple of very sharp stories that we will see interspersed in the daf. So we get started. The Mishnah, I'll show you the Mishnah in its original. The opening Mishnah of the Masechet, we're actually going to get to the second Mishnah today. The opening Mishnah was the way back, so let's remind ourselves, said that the highest mavoi could be is 10. It's more than that, you have to make it lower. The widest it can be is the highest is 20, otherwise make it lower. The widest it can be is 10, otherwise you have to make it smaller. If it's wider than, if it has a surat hapetach that has a door frame, in other words, if it's totally open with nothing on top, just an empty space, then it has to be less than 10 to be a mavoi. But if it has a surat hapetach, it has a lintel and two sides, two doorposts, then even more than 10 amot wide, it's still fine. That's still considered a good mavoi, and we're going to apply that also to haser. So that's where we start. Ashkehan surat hapetach demahanya berochbo ve'amaltera demahanya begobho. Okay, so we saw in the Mishnah just said that a surat hapetach, a door frame, can help us have even a wider than 10. But surat hapetach, it's a door frame, it's like filled in. And we also saw a while ago that amaltera, that's a fancy a molding on top of the door, and said even if it's more than 20, but it has a fancy molding, that's also okay, because the fancy molding will draw your eye upwards. The whole point of why 20 is not good is because that's the highest that normal sight goes. But if it's something fancy, then your eye will go and to look at it. So that we know. Amaltera helps us use more than 20 up, and surat hapetach helps us more than 10 wide. But now our question is, what if we do it the other way around? Can these strategies be used in the other direction? So let's look at each one in turn. Tashema detanya, mavoi shehu gavoa me'asrim amma yema'et, v'im yesh lo surat hapetach eno sarich lema'et. So mavoi, if it's 20 amot, more than 20 amot, you have to bring it down. But if it has a door frame, then you don't have to. So here's the answer to our first question, that a door frame works in both directions. So if you have a door frame, then it can be even higher. So remember, make sure to distinguish between a korah, which we've been talking about a lot. A korah is simply one beam on top. That you need, and it has to be lower than 20. But a door frame is different because it has side posts and a lintel on top. And so that creates a total frame, and it's as if, what if there was a door there, right? Then that would be okay. So it happens to be a door frame, or it has no door, but we consider it like it's filled in. So in that direction, it works. But what about the molding? What if I have some very fancy molding on the side posts? And maybe it would draw my eye. Would that be okay? So the last line says, if it does have a fancy molding, I don't have to make it smaller. So which law is that going on? My love asefa. So isn't it going on the sefa on the last one, which said that if it's wider than 20, wider than 10, then I don't have to make it, I don't have to reduce it if it has a fancy molding. So you see, a fancy molding works, right? No, la arish, I don't have to read it that way. This last line can be talking about the first case, that it only helps vertically. This actually makes sense because the point of this fancy molding is that it's going to draw my eye, so I'll see it even if it's higher. But it doesn't really work to bring two spaces closer together, right? The spaces don't look any closer together just because it has a fancy molding at the around the edges. So that's why it doesn't work. Whereas a door frame works in a completely different way. It basically fills in the area, right? It's a wall, but has a door. That's okay. All right, good. So that that's done. Matni le Rav Yehuda l'chia bar Rav kamed Rav eno sarich lema'et amar le atneye sarich lema'et. And here's where we're going to start our main topic. So again, to go back, we finished topic number 1. Now, if we can use door frames for the majority of the circumference of the whole wall. In other words, you have not a lot of walls, just door frames all around. Is that okay or not? Okay, this is relevant because in almost every city where there's an eruv, we use fishing lines on top of a pole to make door frames all around, and we have mostly door frames. Happens to be in Brooklyn, the eruv that our synagogue made uses 3 full walls. We're able to find, Barry was able to find fences under the Belt Parkway and trains that have fences, and therefore it's actually mostly wall. So our Brooklyn eruv is a superior eruv, unlike many in the world, unless the old city of Jerusalem has walls also, right? But almost every other eruv relies on the fact that these frames are considered a wall all around. So according to the Mishnah, right? Once again, the Mishnah says if it's bigger than 10 and sarich lamet, it's okay. These door frames can be as wide as you want, as long as it holds up. That's okay. Now we're going to see a stringent opinion of Rav, and it's going to apply also to this how many you can use them for the majority around the circumference. Okay, so Rav, our Mishnah says eno sarich lamet. You do not have to bring them closer if you have a door frame. Door frames can be as big as you want. But Rav said, no, the Mishnah doesn't say eno. Take out that word. It says sarich lamet. According to Rav, door frames do not help. Okay, that's the key that we're going to be talking about. That's his big stringency. Even if it has a door frame, it has to be less than 10 in the mavoy, and so also in the chaser. Good. Now we have the application to the circumference. Amar Rav Yosef in Divrei Rabbeinu lemad chaser sherubo petachim v'chalonot ena niteret b'surat hapetach. If you have a chaser that's mostly, let's get some pictures in here, like this. If you have a chaser that is mostly space, right, like this, chalon or a door frame, right, either way, it doesn't really matter. The point is that it does have a top, so it's like a door frame, but within 10 tefachim of the floor, there is space. So this is mostly space, basically door frames. This is the case of most of our cities, with the eruv being mostly door frames. So Rav Yosef says, from the words of Rav, that Surat HaPetach doesn't work more than 10, we can infer that you have a chaser that is mostly space, right? Mostly frames and windows. Surat HaPetach will not help. Okay, so you can't use Surat HaPetach for most of it. You need solid walls. What's the analogy? My ta'ama, what's the analogy between the case of not using Surat HaPetach for more than 10 and not using it for the majority of the walls? Okay, in mavoy, it can't be more than 10. Chaser, right? Remember, mavoy and chaser are a little bit different. Chaser is the common courtyard of 2 houses. Mavoy is the common alleyway of 2 chaserot. Mavoy is a little bit more lenient than chaser, but we're making an analogy between them. Just like in mavoy, the space can't be more than 10. So, and in a chaser, I have to have majority solid walls and minority airspace. That's a law of airspace. אף פרוץ מרובה על העומד, האוסר בחסד אינו ניתן בצורת הפתח. Now we fill in the analogy. Just like Rav said up here, that regarding a mavoi, Surat HaPetach will not help if it's more than 10, has to be only 10. See, Surat HaPetach does not help to fill in space. So too, the analogy is with Chased, that Chased, I cannot use Surat HaPetach to make it the majority. That Surat HaPetach does not fill in the empty space. And so that's the analogy that he makes. And according to this, almost all of our Eruvin would not be good because you cannot use Surat HaPetach for empty space. That is that's what I've said, and that's the interpretation of Rav Yosef of Rav's statement based on this analogy. Now we're gonna reject this analogy. We're going to reject this analogy because we're going to stick this law of paseh biraot in between to show that in paseh biraot there's a difference. Again, paseh biraot means when I have a well in the middle of a shut harabim, and the well is a shut yachid, and I want to draw from the well outside while I'm traveling, and so I can put just 4 corner brackets around, and there's a lot of space, but it has to be less than 10 in each one. And that creates a reshut hayachid. So the well in the middle, just 4 corner brackets, very small brackets, and that is as if it's walls. So in that, according to the Meir, when you have those corner brackets, they have to be up to 10 apart. Yesterday we saw 13 and a third, but that was a different opinion. We're going with the Meir now. They have to be less than 10 apart. And so with paseh biraot, where it can't be more than 10, right? So you see that requirement of less than 10 is very strict, even though in that paseh biraot you can have more space than wall. And so therefore you see that having more space than wall is easier to get around than having something wider than 10. And therefore, just because door frame doesn't work to fill in a space more than 10 doesn't necessarily mean that it won't work to fill in a majority of wall over space. Okay, I know that was a little bit complicated, but the point is that the analogy does not stick. Okay, so lema misaya le. All right, so we don't have that analogy, but we do have a baraita now, and we're going to try to use this baraita to prove that doorways are not effective to close in spaces. Tefanot halalu sheruban petachim bechalonot mutar. This baraita has a self-contradiction in it. It says that the walls have to be, if they're mostly openings and windows, it's okay, as long as there is more wall than empty space. Now, this is a contradiction because the beginning says you can't, if it's mostly openings and windows, well, then that's mostly open space. So it's okay as long as it's not mostly open space. So we gotta figure out what this baraita means. Well, can this really mean mostly? Then you have a contradiction between the beginning and the first and second half. Not mostly, but means a lot. Okay, here's like as follows. You have walls that have a lot of windows and a lot of empty breaches, openings, that's okay. As long as not the majority of the wall all around. The majority has to be solid walls. So there you go. This is a good proof for the Rav's opinion that doorways do not count as walls. It would seem to be a good one, but we're going to reject it. Perhaps this baraita is talking about these kinds of openings where the wall is jagged. In other words, doesn't have a door frame, it's just broken. And so this is worse than having a nice door frame because, you know, people look at this and just say it's a hole, right? Whereas the door frame is part of a wall. So that's why it's no good here, but it's not necessarily a proof for Rav's opinion. We're just going to define this term. Some say it means it doesn't have good doorposts, nice straight doorposts, and some say it means it doesn't have a top at all. It's just totally open. So that's why in that case in Baraita it's no good, but not necessarily as a proof for Rav. Okay, so in the end, we were done with Rav. We didn't have a proof for him, but this is his opinion that a door frame does not fill in a wall.
Rabbi, question on this?
Yes.
So we're saying door frame, but what about the window issue? I assume that the window the bottom of the window has to be a certain distance from the ground, or else it'll be considered...
So a window is basically the same as a door frame. If a window is higher than 10 tefachim off the ground, then that's a wall. Okay, a wall only needs to be 10 tefachim high. Okay, the rest of whatever happens above 30 inches makes no difference. Nobody cares about that. So if there's, well, I don't know. I guess most regular houses the windows are higher up. But if the window is lower down, the bottom of it starts under 30 inches, then it's the same as having an opening, right, with a doorway. The point is that it's empty on below and it has a top, right? So that's why they keep getting included in the same breath. Okay, very good. So now we established that the Mishnah, right? Let's summarize so far. Our Mishnah says that door frames work, and they can span something even bigger than 10 amot, and we would infer from that it can be a majority of the circumference of a chesed. It can be a majority door frames, and that would be okay. That's the Mishnah as we have it in our version. Rav, however, has a different reading of the Mishnah, and therefore he thinks that the door frames, Surat HaPetach, do not work. They do not fill in to have the space. Okay, now we're going to just test out one more sage, Rabbi Yochanan. We set forth the hypothesis that Rabbi Yochanan agrees with Rav to be stringent. Damar Ravin bar Rav Ada, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. מעשה באדם אחד מבקעת בית חורתן, שנעש 4 קונדסים ב4 פינות השדה, ומתח זה מורה עליהם. ובא מעשה לפני חכמים, והתירו לו לעניין כלאיים. So we're going to write this from this following case, that a person came and he has a field, and we know the law of k'laim. You can't plant vines and other vegetables in the same plot or even near each other. However, if you have a wall in between, right, then you can put vines right up to the wall and other vegetables right up to the wall on the other side. So here's what this brilliant man did. Instead of making a full wall, he made a frame, right? He made a frame. The frame was made out of 4 poles that he stuck in the ground, and he took some vines and he looped them over the pole to this one and over to the next one, and now we had a door frame. The sages, he brought the attention of the sages, and the sages said it's okay for kilayim. You can plant one item in here and a different item out here, and this acts as a wall. Okay, now so far this looks like a door frame is good. But hold on, we didn't finish. The Shakish said it's a good wall for all purposes, Kilayim and Shabbat also. So in other words, according to the Shakish, you can carry inside this thing because it's has walls on all sides, so it's a Reshut HaYachid. That's the Shakish. However, the Yochanan Amar, the Kilayim Yitiru Lo, the Inyan Shabbat, Lo Yitiru Lo. When it says that the sages said it's permitted, you see it says the word Le'inyan Kilayim. Only for Kilayim, they said, okay, you could plant, but not for Shabbat. Therefore, we see, according to the Yochanan, a door frame is not it's not considered a partition regarding Shabbat. And so you see, he agrees with Rav that says the door frames are not considered something that's filled in. That's our attempted proof. Okay, now we're going to go through a series of back and forths, rejecting this proof and trying to revive it. In the end, we're going to reject it. We don't have a proof for the Yochanan. But this is going to go through some technicalities, so hold on to your seats. B'may askinan ilem aminasad ואמר רבי חיסדא, שורת הפתח שעשה מן הסד, לא עשה ולא כלום. All right, this is an important shita of Rav Chisda. Okay, this is the case we were thinking of when it loops over the top. Here's a slightly different variant. If it doesn't loop over the top of the pole, but rather on the side of the pole. See, this is not as good. Usually when you have doorposts, you put the doorpost first and the lintel on top, and it overhangs, right, goes on top of the doorpost. That's the right way. That's what looks normal. When you have something like this, where the doorpost, right, made out of vines, comes from the side of it, this doesn't look like a normal door frame. And so Rav Chisda says this is no good. It's nothing. Okay, so now we're analyzing this case that this man made this trellis. What was the case? Was it like this, right, or did it come from the sides? Well, Rav Chisda says if you did it on the sides, it's nothing. It's zero. Ela al gaban. So it must be that he put it on top. Ubemai ilema be'aser v'halem Rabbi Yochanan b'Shabbat lo. He put it on top. Now, how big was the space between these? If it was less than 10 or less, so why would Rabbi Yochanan say it's no good? Everybody would agree that if it's less than 10, it should be perfectly fine. Ela la bi'ater me'aser. Rather, it must be that it's more than 10. Okay. So if we say that this is more than 10. And you put it over the top like a normal one. Now that's the proof that Rabbi Yochanan is machmir like Rav and says a doorway more than 10 is nothing, is no good. Okay. By the way, that's very important, right? Even according to Rav, if it's less than 10, everybody agrees that that's good. That's a doorway. Only question is if it's more than 10. Right? If you had to make it less than 10 in our modern city, that would be really, really hard to make surround the whole city with poles. Right? We use, fishing lines and telephone lines that are very long, and that's the only thing that makes it possible. Right? Okay, so now we have a proof so far that Rabbi Yochanan is machmir like Rav, but now we reject it. No, maybe it's only 10. And it's on the sides, right? And there's an argument about Rav Chisda, right? I know Rav Chisda said he says it's not allowed, but maybe there's a machloket in that regard, and maybe it is a case where you put it on the side, and it's less than 10, but it's a machloket whether on the side less than 10 is good or not, and that's what we're talking about. Okay, so if that's true, I mean that's a possibility, and then we don't have a proof about something that's more than 10 amot wide. Well, okay, so that right now we don't have a proof, but we're going to try to revive a proof in a little bit complicated way. We're going to bring in another tradition to compare it. We have another version of their machloket, which contradicts the version that we just said. In this version, everybody is one step more machmir. This is the name of Rabbi Hanina. Basically the same case, a braid of vines, and you put it around a frame. That is a good partition for kilayim. Avalol Shabbat bana for Shabbat. That's what Resh Lakish said. Rabbi Yochanan amar ki mechesot Shabbat telo, kach mechesot kilayim telo. Rabbi Yochanan says it's not a good frame at all for anything. So whereas in the previous version, Resh Lakish said it's a good frame for both. And Rabbi Yochanan says only for kilayim, not for Shabbat. Now, the Resh Lakish takes that middle position, and Rabbi Yochanan says it's no good at all. So now we have two different versions of the machloket, and both contradict each other. But we're going to try to resolve them. We're not going to just leave it as, well, someone forgot. So Bishlama de Resh Lakish la kashya, hadide hadirabe. Resh Lakish we can answer easily. The first one was his own opinion, that was Tupa Mekel. And the second one, we just said, it's the name of Rabbi Hanina. He was saying in the name of Rabbi Hanina, but it was not his own opinion. So we resolved that. Okay, but Resh Lakish doesn't matter for us anyway. Ela Rabbi Yochanan kashya. What about Rabbi Yochanan? Up there, he said that it's no good for Shabbat, and now he said it's no good for Shabbat or Kilayim. If you would say up there it's talking about when it's on top, and here it's on the side, so that this is talking about two different cases, right? Then that would make sense. The reason he was more mekel above is because it was resting on top of the poles, and here is more machmir because it's on the side of the poles. So that would make sense. But if both of them are from the sides, then how are you going to explain it? Right? There's no way to explain it if they're both from the sides. So it has to be from the top, and therefore you see it's a good proof. No, not necessarily. No, they could both be on the sides, and there it's only 10, and here it's more than 10. And so you see that when it's more than 10, it's no good, and when it's less than 10, it is good. Okay. So now, how do we know? From where do we get any idea that for kilayim, it makes a difference if it's more than 10 or less than 10? Okay, by the way, this is all for kilayim. So for Shabbat, it's no good, right? So that's the main point here. Okay, for kilayim, how do you know that more than 10 and less than 10, it makes a difference? Even though Rabbi Yoshua was an expert in the laws of kilayim, he still went one day to Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri to learn. And he was sitting there, among the trees, and he went and took a vine and stretched it from one tree to the next. He says, what about a case like this and have vines here and something else on the other side? Is that allowed? It's less than 10, it's okay. More than 10, it's not good. So you see there's a difference between less than 10 and more than 10 regarding kilayim, and so that's how we can use that difference to explain the difference of opinion between the two versions of Rabbi Yochanan's statement. Now, b'may askinan, what case is it dealing with? Ilema al gaban yoter me'eser asur. והתניא היו שם קנים הדוקרנים ועשה להם פאה מלמעלה אפילו ביותר מ10 מותר. Wait, if you're talking about that they're stretched above, we have another baraita that says a case like this. Dokranin is like poles, stakes that go into the ground. This picture looks like a Salvador Dali painting, right? All you need is a melting clock in the background, right? Okay, but anyway, the point is that you have these poles and you have a vine that's stretched on top, right? And they're on top of the poles. And this says, even if it's more than 10, it's okay. So if it's on top, then it should be okay even more than 10. Rather, it must be talking about that it's from the side of it, like that. And the point that it's teaching is that 10 is allowed, more than 10 is not allowed. So that is the conclusion. So we can learn from this that there is a distinction between poles that are 10 and more than 10, and that's how we resolve the contradiction between the two statements of Rabbi Yochanan. But again, this contradiction only helps us regarding kilayim, but not regarding Shabbat. So in the end, regarding Shabbat, there's no proof either way what Rabbi Yochanan thinks. Okay, so that finishes this section. So let's summarize what we have so far. So regarding the status of door frames, all right, the Mishnah said that a door frame, Surat HaPetach, can be as wide as you want. And that is in fact the halacha l'maaseh, even though Rav says no, and Rabbi Yochanan maybe says no, because he did say something, but we said not necessarily. But halacha is like the Mishnah as we have it, and that's why we can use an eruv, and for door frames of an eruv, and it's even as wide as you want, and you can even use them for the majority of the circumference. So this is a source for what we use for our eruvin. Okay, so that was good. That was very important. And now a couple of more details about how to build a door frame. Gufa. Right again, Rav Chisda said in a case like this, where right here it's sticking up, this is nothing. This is no good. Another thing Rav Chisda said in the same topic. Afilu delet shel kashin. When you make a door frame, it's got to be somewhat sturdy. sturdy enough that it could hold a door. You don't have to actually put a door on it, but it has to be sturdy enough that you could hang a door on it, even if it's a very light door, a door made out of straw. It doesn't have to be a heavy door, metal door, right? Anything. It has to be somewhat sturdy. But Amar Lakish Mishum Nabi Anai, Surat Petach Sedecha Heker Sir. My Heker Sir, Amar Ravya Abkata. So Lakish adds that has to have a hinge also. And what does that mean, a hinge? In those days, they didn't have hinges like we do, which are on the side on the doorpost, but rather they had pivot hinges. Some people still have this, like in certain closets, closet doors, right? Pivot hinge. So the hinge the hole for the hinge is on the floor and up on top. So he says that you must make a hole over here so that it looks like a doorway. It looks like a real doorway, just happens to be missing a door, but you have to have that hole for the hinge. Okay, who said that? It was Shakish, but it was Rav Avya that explained what it is, this word avketa. And now we have a cute story. Ashkachinhu Rav Acha bered Rav Avya. That's this Rav Avya. His son once found a student of Rav Asher. And he asked him, Madahu, Amar Mor Mideh Besurat HaPetach. And so the son of Rav Avya asked the student of Rav Asher, did your master teach any law about how to construct a Surat HaPetach? His student said, no, he never taught anything about it. Okay, that's the end of the story. I think the story is saying that the son wanted to see, did his father's teaching make it into the curriculum, right? Are they teaching that? So he's like fishing, did he say anything? Like maybe he said something about making a hinge, and the student's like, no, he never taught us that. So I suppose the son was sad. But anyway, they should be happy because his statement is in fact in the Talmud and the story about them too. Okay, good. Now, how to build a doorway? Tana, Surat HaPetach Shamru Kaneh Mikan, Vekaneh Mikan, Vekaneh Al Gabehen, 2 doorposts and a lintel on top. Sirichin Liga or En Sirichin Liga. The question is, do the doorposts have to reach all the way up to the top, or can there be space in between? I don't have a picture of that, right? But you can easy to imagine. It's kind of like, this is a lot of times on Sukkot, right? You have a sukkah, and as long as the wall is a certain height, it doesn't have to reach to the schach. We say good asik. So, well, this is not exactly the same, but this is the same question. Do the doorposts have to go all the way up to the lintel, or can the doorposts just be like 10 tefachim high, and then there'll be empty space as long as the lintel is hovering right over the doorpost? Is that good enough? Rav Nachman Amar En Sirichin Liga, Rav Sheshat Amar Sirichin Liga. Rav Nachman is Mekel, Rav Sheshat is Machmir. This actually also makes as an important halacha for us, because a lot of times if we use telephone wires, we have a problem with telephone wires, right? If you look outside your window, you'll see most telephone wires don't go over the top of the pole, or rather they hang off the side of the pole, right? And so they're not actually on top of the pole, which is a problem. So what we have to do is we have to attach another piece of wood besides the telephone pole that will be right under the telephone wire. Yeah. Now, if it has to reach all the way up, now you're going to have to go and get a really long beam. It has to be as tall as the telephone, up to the telephone wire and touching the telephone wire, which is a lot more complicated. However, if you follow Rav Nachman, then all you need is a little short beam, right? You just tack it on to the bottom of the telephone pole and line it up with the telephone wire, and then we imagine as if it goes all the way up and it's okay. So this is actually also a very important and practical halacha. So again, Rav Nachman is Mekel, and so we have a couple of a fantastic story now. Azal Rav Nachman d'Abad Obada be'erash Kedesh Kaluta kesh ma'ateh. Kedesh Kaluta, the exilarch, is in charge of all the Jewish community in Bavel. Very important, rich, powerful person. And so in his town or his home, the Rav Nachman went and built an eruv for him, and he followed his own opinion and made short poles because he said that's okay. And he said they don't have to reach the top. אמר לרב ששת לשמעי רב גדה, זיל שלוף שדין הוא. Rav Sheshet saw that and said, this is not kosher. And he told his attendant, Rav Gada, go and take it down, right? Go and destroy his eruv, which is quite amazing because, nowadays we have people sabotaging eruvin to the point that most eruvs don't actually publish exactly where they are, so that people won't go find them and start ripping down the wires because they do. So anyway, we should maybe feel comforted that this is nothing new. In the times of the Talmud also, here we have two Amoraim. Rav Sheshet is ripping down the eruv that Rav Nachman made because he's more mahmir about it. Anyway, this was not really a very good idea because he ripped down the eruv of the Resh Galuta, the most powerful Jew. Azal Shalaf Shadinhu. So they went and imprisoned him, right? The exilarch imprisoned Rav Gada, the servant, for destroying his property. Poor guy, he was just listening to his rabbi. Ashkahuhu deber eshkaluta chabshuhu. I put him in jail. Azal Rav Sheshet kam ababa male Gada hokta defak ve'ata. So Rav Sheshet went and saved him from jail. He said, no, he was doing it because of me, and so he convinced the prison guards to let him go. Okay, so we have a happy ending, but you see, Rav Sheshet was almost got in real trouble for this. Okay, Ashkehaya Rav Sheshet leRabba bar Shemuel v'amar leh. Rav Sheshet is going to get himself into a little bit more trouble now. Okay, one time he found this rabbi, Rabba bar Shemuel, and he said, Taneh mor mider Surat HaPetach. Do you have any teachings, any baraitot that you know about Surat HaPetach? He was very interested in this topic. Please tell me anything that you have. Yes, I have a tradition about this, a baraita. Tanena, kippah. Oh, this is very interesting. Right, for archways. What do we consider an archway? This is very important regarding mezuzah. A lot of people have archways in their homes or their front doors. And, is an archway, is that considered a lintel or not? Kippah, Rabbi Meir mechayeh b'mezuzah, chamim poterim. So Rabbi Meir says, yes, you have to. Chamim say no, because where's the lintel, right? Up here, this little bit, it's a round lintel. It doesn't work. So chamim say you don't have to put a mezuzah. However, they do agree that if this part, the lower part, has 10, I'll show you here, it's easier. If the straight part has 10 tefachim by itself, right? So then there's clearly a nice open space. And then the dome, we disregard the arch as long as it's 4 across. As long as 4 across by 10, you have this much space. Then everyone agrees that's a proper opening and it requires a mezuzah. Okay, that would probably apply to most of our cases. Amar Abaye, Abaye is just going to explain this a bit. Im gavoha asara ve'en b'ragleh shelosha, iname yesh b'ragleh shelosha ve'en gavoha asara ve'lo kelum. Everybody agrees in these two cases. If you need to have an opening has to be 4 tefachim wide. If within the first 3 tefachim from the floor, it's not always open 4 tefachim sideways, then everybody agrees this is not a doorway. This is too small. This is just a mouse hole. Okay, it has to be that wide for at least 3 tefachim. So this scenario, everyone agrees, does not require mezuzah. And if it doesn't reach 10 at all, right? It doesn't matter, even if it reaches 3, but if the top never reaches 10, everyone also agrees that this is not a doorway, doesn't need a mezuzah. Okay, sometimes this happens. There's like little hatches in a house, like for air conditioning system, there's a tiny little door, but if it's less than this, doesn't need a mezuzah. The question is, in a case like this, where the first 3 is wide enough, and it does reach 10, but it tapers off in between. What do we do in that case? In this case, if you would chisel away the extra area, in other words, just follow the line from here and follow this line and chisel everything away. If you would do that, it would meet the minimum requirements of 10 by 4. But you have to like imaginatively chisel it away. Do you do that? Yes, we do chisel away to make it, to complete it. Not actually chisel it away, just imaginatively. Rabban say, no, you do not chisel it away, and therefore it's not a doorway. Okay, so that's the analysis that we just had. Now, why do we bring all this? Well, this is relevant to us because in a case like this, right? Here, this is, let's say, the side post. The side post actually does not go under the top, the lintel. The lintel is this piece here. So the lintel the side post does not reach up to the lintel. That's the point, right? The side post does not reach up to the lintel. And so therefore, this would be okay for Rav Nachman, who says it doesn't need to reach up. We can kind of imagine it going up. But this baraita does not work for Rav Sheshat, right? You see that? And so this is a baraita which is authoritative, and it indicates, it's a slightly different configuration, but it would seem to indicate that the sides do not have to go up to the top. It's more lenient, and against Rav Sheshat, who was more strict. Amaleh, so Rav Sheshat, that's all that Rabbi Shmuel said. The Abaye is in parentheses. He just later adding some explanation about it. Amaleh imashkachat lehu la'atema lehu leber ashkaluta velamide meha matnita dechipa. So Rav Sheshat's answer to Rabbi Shmuel. At first he said, "Do you have any teachings? Please teach me something." Oh, I have a good baraita for you. And so his response is, listen, if you find anyone from the exilarch's house, don't tell him this baraita. Why not? Because this baraita is a proof against me, right? And then I'll be in big trouble, because after all, he just destroyed the Rish Kaluta's Eruv that Rav Nachman built, and he had to, barely get himself out of jail. And so, please don't tell them this baraita. Okay, so that's very cute. And if you have patience for I don't know, about 5 more minutes, well, we could start the next Mishnah and get up to the bottom of the page. So next Mishnah starts Hechsher Mavoy. How do you make a Mavoy? We already saw this, but right now this is the place where it is. Bet Shammai Omrim Lechi Vekora. Bet Shammai is more machmir and says you need a vertical post and a horizontal post, both. Bet Hillel Omrim O Lechi Okara. No, just one or the other. Rabbi Eliezer Omer Lechayayin. There's 2 posts on each side. Mishum Rabbi Yishmael Amar Tamid Echad Ifnei Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Yishmael reported as follows, that there was a student of Rabbi Akiva that said about this, Lo nechleku bet Shammai bet Hillel amavoy shu pachot me'arba amot shu nitad o belechi o bakora. It says that if the mavoy is less than 4 amot, then everyone agrees you need only one thing, lechi or korah. Even Bet Shammai would agree to that. What is the machloket about if it's between 4 and 10? Bet Shammai omrim lechi vekorah, Bet Hillel o lechi o korah. And more than 10, obviously, is no good. That's what the student said. Rabbi Akiva rejected what the student said, and he said, no, the machloket is, no matter what, anything less than 10, Bet Shammai would say you need lechi and korah. Bet Hillel would say one or the other. Obviously, halacha will be that you only need one or the other. Okay, the Gemara asks, Keman, vela kehananya vela ketanakama. A couple of dapim ago, we had a braita that said as follows, right? That Tanakama says you need a door frame on one side and the mavo and the korah on the other side, and then Hananya said no, it's machloket, and you need an actual door, or at least on one side, and maybe 2 doors according to Bet Shammai. So all those requirements were much more than our Mishnah. So what is going on here, right? Whose opinion is this? Says, no, you misunderstood this whole thing. When it says Hechsher Mavoy, it's not talking about any Mavoy, it's talking about Mavoy Satum. That means it's enclosed on 3 sides, has 3 full walls, and only 1 open wall. That's what this whole Mishnah is talking about. It's enclosed on 3 sides, all you need for Bet Hillel is one beam to make it okay. Whereas that baraita that we saw a while ago was talking about mavoy that's open on two sides, open on both sides. In that case, you need more. Okay, good.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
this Gemara comes after,
Yeah.
like after the Gemara that we discussed at Beraita, because it's a rereading of the original Beraita, right?
Right. Right.
The original Beraita had Reshut Harabim, not Mavoy, and we made it Ukimta that it was a Mavoy.
Oh, very good. Yeah, that's a good point. Good. So that this whole question could only be after that. We already made that Ukimta. Okay, excellent. Great point. Okay, Bet Shammai omrim lechi v'kora. Lememra tekasabre Bet Shammai arba mechisot deoraita. So now Bet Shammai says you need a lechi and kora. That's a lot of things. Like once you have both of those things, it's like you almost have a full wall. So should we infer from this that according to Bet Shammai, arba mechisot deoraita, I need 4 walls to turn the Reshut Harabim into the Reshut Yachid? That midoraita, I need 4 walls. To make a private domain. La lizrok mishalosh hu medechayev letaltel ad deika arba. No, you can't. Don't assume that. Rather, midoraita, really 3 walls would be enough to make it a shut yachid. And how do we know that? Because the effect would be lizrok. If I'm outside and I want to throw something inside and has 3 walls, then Bet Shammai would say you can't do that. 3 walls is enough to be machmir, that you can't pass from one to the other. However, it's not fully considered a shut yachid with 3 walls, because if it was really fully the shut yachid, you'd be able to carry inside, right? So I mean, these go together. If you say I can't throw it in, that's because outside the shut harabim and inside the shut yachid. Well, if so, then I should be able to carry inside, because Reshut HaYachid. But you see that with 3 walls, it's kind of in between. We're machmir regarding transferring from outside to in, and we're machmir also regarding walking inside. So you can think of it as a safek, or in terms of that midoraita, it's a Reshut HaYachid from midrabanan. We are machmir and say you still can't walk between until you have a 4th wall, and that's why it requires the 4th wall. But that's only required midrabanan. Okay, same exercise for Bet Hillel. Bet Hillel omrim o lechi o kora. Lema kasabre Bet Hillel shalosh mechisot deoraita. Bet Hillel says only need 1 beam. So that's it. So if you only need 1 beam, then really it's not doing much. So should we derive from that 3 mechitzot makes it a shut yachid me deoraita, right? Fully. La lizrok mishetayim hu demechayev. So everything is 1 step down. So really, for Bet Hillel, even if there's only 2 walls, already we have to suspect that this could be a Reshut HaYachid, and you can't even throw from Reshut Harabim to this 2 wall, the Reshut HaYachid. And the 3 that I need, and then if I add 3, then I know that the 2 was still asur to walk. To carry in there midrabanan. When I have 3 walls, then that's okay. And the last one, that's only why I only need 1 little korah to indicate the last wall, so that I don't come to carry mistakenly into the public thoroughfare. And that's it for the stuff. We covered many important topics and a lot of practical halachot for modern day, that make possible modern day Eruvin. Baruch Adonai L'olam. Amen. Amen.